Well, hello, Gary. I see you find it kind of difficult to keep up with several topics at once. So maybe I need to try to break these videos up, and I'll go ahead and put a deliberate break in the video when we change topics. Okay? Focus. Focus. Are you with me? Okay. First off, Ron Paul nuts and these gold standard nuts. I get a, kind of get a laugh out of that. I call a lot of these flag wavers patriotards. They're just so preoccupied with we have the right to do this and we have the right to do that, but yet they don't see the real enemy in our midst. Again, back to the Stockholm syndrome. Okay? But you cannot escape the fact that constitutionally, is that too big of a word? Constitutionally, our currency was to be regulated by Congress, and it was supposed to be based on gold and silver. So if someone denies that, yet they profess other constitutional rights, if the word constitution ever even comes out of their mouth, with things like free speech or the right to keep and bear arms, then they're simply hypocrites. When you talked about fractional reserve banking and said, well, it has to be, you have to have fractional reserve banking to even have a bank, you meant to say that current banks, currently the banks, use fractional reserve banking. But they don't have to be fractional reserve. Fractional reserve banking is how banks have slowly but surely acquired nearly all the tangible wealth. The banks own it. Let's say that according to fractional reserve banking, one person makes a deposit. The bank will then turn around and lend on that deposit that was made. But banks today lend dramatically in excess of the deposit. Let's say they get a $10 deposited. They'll turn around and lend out $100. That's backed up only by 10. And we're using that for simple numbers. Simple numbers. Then someone pays back a portion of their loan. Let's say they had borrowed $10,000. They pay back $100 at a time. The bank will say when they get the $100 in, oh, that's great. We now have $100. What are we going to do? I know. We'll issue loans on $1,000. And the process continues. What you're doing, Gary, is taking fractional reserve banking that we see today and trying to make it a minimal issue. The fractional banking that's corrupt, that's the one I'm speaking of, is when banks will compound the fractional reserve and to continue to issue loans on what they are compounding. And we can thank Congress for giving them the power to do that. So, later on we'll talk about how Congress are a bunch of traitors and they're treasonous, but just overlook that for right now because we're not going to get there yet. The fractional reserve banking that would be fair and logical, in my opinion, let's say you have a farmer that wants to borrow money to buy a farm. Okay, he's going to get a loan of, round numbers again. He's going to get a loan of $100,000. The bank loans him money. He buys the farm and starts to make the payments. Meanwhile, the $100,000 is safe because there's a tangible asset to back up the loan. As the Joe Schmo farmer, we'll call him Farmer Brown, pays off the loan. Let's say he gets halfway to having it paid off. The bank will now have $50,000 in cash paid back that they can issue loans on again. The compounding must have reasonable limits. In fairness, banks should make their money off of fees or fixed interest rates. What we see today is money that's created out of thin air through this fractional reserve banking. And you talk about the FDIC offers insurance. Now that really is funny, Gary. They insure your deposit with what? With more worthless paper? If suddenly there's a mad rush to the banks for people to get their cash and the banks couldn't back it up, sure, the depositors are insured up to a certain amount again. I think the FDIC regulations say $100,000. But what the depositors would get in their insurance is just more paper. I think, again, for simplicity, I think a bank should be run like a pawn shop. But for a small scale example, pawn shop, we'll call it a bank. They charge outrageous interest, first off, but the overall fairness principle applies, okay? You take a television in to pawn it, or you take it in to get a loan. The TV gets appraised at, let's say, $100, but your loan will probably be for something like $75 because they won't loan in excess of the value. But they hold on to that $100 item as surety for the loan. You come back later, but let's say you can't pay off the full loan. So you cover the interest. Let's say they're charging interest and you have $10 that you have to catch up on interest. Well, the lender has made $10 in profit now that he can turn around now and issue in another loan to someone else. Meanwhile, he still holds the tangible asset that's worth the $100, and he still has his $75 that's due back to him. He can't say, I've got $100 in assets and thus lend $1,000 out to someone else. You put it on a larger scale for banks. Banks who hold things like mortgages on real estate, not TVs or DVD players like you would take into a pawn shop. Larger scale items of surety relate to larger loans. And just on a side note here again, and this is to educate people, not necessarily for you to comment on, because if you commented against this next item, it would just show how dumb you are. So no comment to this, and to do yourself a favor. Just on a side note, let's say someone thinks in financial terms that they're going to try to make money with the bank and go get like a certificate of deposit. The best CD I've found recently pays 1.74%. Of course, the banks turn around and take your deposit, and they're going to invest in it, or invest with it. Let's say they invest in a stock somewhere, or maybe they invest in actually issuing the loan to someone else at a higher interest rate than they're paying you in the CD. So of course they'll pay you that 1.74% if they're going to make 10% in an investment. But meanwhile, this is the part I was going to get to. Keep in mind we have this phenomena called a rate of inflation. Nearly always the rate of inflation is over 2%, generally reaching well over 3%. Yet your deposit pays back under the rate of inflation. Translation, you lose. That was just a welcome to the modern era of slavery under capitalism. I'm going to go ahead and click this video off, and we're going to get on to the next topic.